Germany, beer, cars, world wars?
No one is ever encircled anymore, bro!
One of the most powerful countries in recent history. Just the formation of this country caused the two biggest rivals in history to ally together against them. But what if Germany managed to form before France and Britain became powers? What if Germany existed in a world where they would be the most powerful country? To understand why the Germans formed so late, first we must learn why Germany is the way that it is. One of the first people to name the Germans was Julius Caesar, who called them Germani. Germanic tribes lived in small villages of wooden houses, they grew grains and kept animals such as cows and pigs, while hunting and fishing for extra food. Each village belonged to a larger clan led by a chief who protected everyone. They made iron tools and simple clothes, traded furs and amber for Roman pottery, and worshipped many gods. After a while, the Roman Empire fell and basically disappeared from Western Europe, which 300 years later gave rise to a certain Charlemagne. This man wanted to restore the Roman Empire and so conquered France, northern Italy and parts of Germany, and became the Holy Roman Emperor. The Germans finally became part of an empire, but it wouldn't last long. Charlemagne died and his son, Louis, became the new emperor. After the death of Louis, his empire fragmented into three separate countries. Otto later became the ruler of the kingdom of East Francia, or what we call today Germany. But here's the problem. Otto didn't create a united Germany. He invaded Italy and became emperor of the Holy Roman Empire. A huge, messy collection of dukes, bishops and free cities that all basically did their own thing. Instead of one Germany, we got hundreds of mini Germanies. And this lasted for centuries. Why? Because power was split. Local lords and the church didn't want a strong central king. So, for over 800 years, Germany stayed divided. While France and England centralized, built navies and colonized the world, Germany was stuck fighting itself. So, to make sure that Germany formed in 1525 AD, we need to alter an event that could have changed everything. The 1495 Worms Reform. No, not that Worms, these Worms. So, what really happened there? At the Imperial Diet in Worms, 1495, Emperor Maximilian I won approval for two big reforms. The Ewiger Landfriede, or Eternal Public Peace, which banned nobles from waging private wars against each other, and the Gemeiner Pfennig, a small empire-wide tax to fund an imperial army and courts. In reality, both collapsed almost immediately because nobody respected these laws. The emperor had no imperial army to enforce the law across the empire. He relied on the same nobles who were often breaking it. So, to make sure that we have a centralized HRE by 1525, we need some changes to this treaty. Regarding internal peace, the emperor can send peacekeepers directly into any territory to stop feuds. Local rulers must allow these forces or face imperial punishment, and imperial courts are now the only legal authority for settling major disputes. Regarding the empire-wide tax, the emperor sends imperial tax officials to collect the tax. So no relying on local nobles. All the money goes into a central imperial treasury that pays for a small imperial standing army and imperial courts and administrators and infrastructure like roads and postal services. Over time, these institutions would grow stronger and stronger, slowly giving the emperor more and more power, which would allow him to enact even more reforms, centralizing the empire even more. So now, with stronger laws and imperial tax collectors, things start to change. If two dukes have beef, they go to the imperial court, and if they don't, boom, imperial troops knock on their castle doors. In 1519, the princes of the empire gather and elect Charles, already king of Spain and the Low Countries, as their new emperor. Now, with real power behind the title, Charles V is ready to enforce peace, back up his reforms, and keep every duchy in line. With surely nothing going wrong in the near future, right? The first challenge this centralizing empire would receive would be the Protestant Reformation. which was basically Europe looking like this, and Martin Luther saying,
"Why does the Pope have a ton of power? And why are all Bibles written in Latin so only a few people can read it? Fuck this shit. Let's translate the Bible so that everyone can read it and people can have a say in it."
Boom, the entirety of Western Europe is now split in two, Catholics and Protestants. In the real world, this religious divide led to political fragmentation. The emperor wanted to keep the empire Catholic and centralized, but too many powerful Protestant nobles wanted to protect their own power, and thus the empire became even more divided than it already was. So, how do we prevent the Reformation from tearing up the semi-united empire? Charles V was a convinced Catholic and would oppose the Reformation on all accounts. But seeing as his predecessor had passed some very important reforms to centralize the empire, I think he would realize the necessity to keep the empire intact, and keep centralizing it even more. At the Diet of Worms of 1521, where the emperor met for the first time with Luther, the results were not so great. But in this world, I think Charles would recognize the necessity to keep the Protestants inside his empire happy, especially since by 1521, the number of Protestants in his empire would have reached a considerable amount, with many more converting in the years to come. I think Charles would do some changes to keep the Protestants happy, while not angering the Pope too much. Some reforms I think Charles would enact would be the following. Translate the Bible into local languages. Keep ties to Rome, but remove indulgences. Create a religious council that would handle religious issues, made up of both Protestants and Catholics. By 1525, we can technically say that we have a unified Germany in the form of a more centralized HRE. Then comes the second test, the Peasants' Revolt. In real history, it was a chaotic rebellion that the nobles crushed on their own. Why? Because the peasants wanted to lower the power of nobles and demanded rights. In this timeline, however, a powerful emperor with an imperial army behind him could step in and promise reforms. That way, he could lower the power of local nobles further and help unify the people under the emperor. With the peasants calmed and the nobles humbled, the emperor now has real control for the first time. He makes one set of laws for the whole empire, so people don't have to follow different rules in every town. Everyone starts using the same coins, which makes it easier to trade and buy things. Sorry, coin collectors. New imperial roads and a mail system help people travel and send messages all over the empire. This would slowly help create a German national identity. The Italian part of the empire, on the other hand, wouldn't like the increasing power of the emperor, and since Italy was the part of the empire where the emperor had the least amount of power, they would all eventually leave the empire. The emperor uses his unified imperial army to keep peace at home and help him in wars abroad. One of those wars involves the Ottoman Turks. In 1529, they almost take Vienna in our real history, but here, the HRE's united army rushes to defend the city and pushes the Ottomans back. This gives the empire even more legitimacy and helps the empire centralize even more. France and England notice the rising power next door. To keep Germany from dominating, a new rival emerges in the east, the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. Stretching from the Baltic to the Black Sea, this alliance teams up with Sweden to balance Germany's influence in Northern Europe. France's position especially would be threatened by this new HRE, with them possibly becoming the most powerful continental force. Not only that, but France would also feel the pressure from their southern border, as Spain and the HRE had the same emperor at the time. This would most likely lead the French to form an alliance with the HRE's biggest rival, the Ottoman Empire. In the Baltic Sea, a Swedish-Polish defensive alliance against the HRE would be made, to make sure that the Germans don't manage to take over the Baltic Sea, not only militarily but also commercially, as trade in the Baltic was heavily influenced by German coastal cities. I am not sure if the HRE would want colonies, but judging how Imperial Germany wanted colonies after it formed in our own timeline, let's assume that this HRE would want some colonies as well, with the added bonus of having the Netherlands and Belgium, which had major Atlantic harbors in our world. Enter the Welser family, an Augsburg banking dynasty whose massive loans to Charles V in 1528 won them a 30-year imperial charter to explore, govern and exploit Klein Venedig, Germany's very first New World colony. In our world, Klein Venedig went back to the Spanish and that was the end of it. But in this universe, Charles V now has another empire with colonial ambitions. The Welser Charter is issued under imperial and not Spanish authority. German administrators and imperial troops garrison Klein Venedig, ensuring its revenues flow into the imperial treasury. This leads to mass migration to the colony from the mainland, flooding this region with Germans and Dutch settlers. This would result in a gigantic growth in this region, and we could see Klein Venedig, or Little Venice, expand and take even more of the region. Eventually, Charles V would die in 1558, and his land would be split. Just like in real life, I believe that Ferdinand would get the HRE, and Philip II would get the Spanish throne. By this point in time, the HRE would probably be very centralized. All these changes we have made so far would eventually lead to the 30 Years' War not even happening. But a different conflict would probably happen. With the HRE having many rivals across Europe, each eyeing up different parts of the empire, we could see a giant conflict arise with two coalitions. The first would be the Imperial Coalition led by the HRE and supported by the Spanish Empire, wanting a strong ally in Europe against France and Britain. The second coalition would be formed by France, Sweden, the Ottomans and the English. If this war would end on an imperial victory, it would cement the HRE and Spain as the most powerful countries of Europe, one being a colonial powerhouse, while the other controls the continent. The war would start in 1622, with the French and Imperial Army going head to head. The French army would make considerable gains, pushing into Lorraine. At the same time, Sweden enforces a blockade in the Baltic, and the Polish army ravages the east of the empire. The Ottomans try to force a breakthrough in the south of the empire, but they are kept at bay. So far, the balance of powers is not favoring the Imperial Alliance. The Franco-Spanish border is not being crossed by either powers, Spain instead opting to use its navy to help in the war. The Spanish Armada, which wasn't sunk in this timeline, would manage to keep both the French and English navies at bay, as they would be evenly matched. The French slowly advance deeper into Holy Roman Empire territory, and the Polish start having territorial successes as well. But in 1627, a young and small Russia officially joins the conflict on the side of the Imperial Coalition, with the goal of taking Poland's eastern territories. This completely collapses the Eastern Front, leading to both Poland and Sweden capitulating and giving territorial concessions to the Russians and the HRE. After this, the conflict slowly turned into a stalemate, with nobody being able to make any more gains. The Treaty of Nuremberg of 1634 finally ends the war, with France annexing some border regions in Lorraine. The main beneficiary from this war would be Russia, who managed to assert itself as one of the great European powers. There are so many ways this alternate history scenario could go from here. Maybe Spain and Russia will turn on the HRE to break up that powerful state. Maybe the HRE's colony breaks free and becomes a global superpower. Who knows? If this video gets 2000 likes, I'll try to make a part 2, but I don't think that will happen. Thank you guys for watching and see you all in the next episode.